questions here. If you feel like standing up and exercising at any point, feel free. You'll all understand. I was thinking about in this whole series, we're talking about the quest, spiritual quest. I sort of like that word. And each of the sessions is talking about searching in some way. And I think it's a healthy way to think about what life is all about. The journey image is a familiar one to many people, thinking about life as this voyage of discovery or this journey. In the Second Vatican Council, we like to talk about the pilgrim people. The church is in the emphasis that we want to travel light. We've got to get rid of some of the accretions of the past. There's a certain excitement, I think, about that whole idea of the quest, the looking for, the sense that life is not complete. It captures a lot of this sense of the question that we have in the center of our being. And so it fits in very much, I think, with what we often feel in the 20th century, or the way many people experience life, that it's unsettled, that it's not together, that there's loose ends, that there's more to be done, that there's some place you're supposed to get to. All this idea of quest and journey. I think it's built very much into our American psyche. It's part of the way we tend to think about life, sort of the adventuresome spirit. We're going to go travel. We're going to explore the world. We're going to move west and see what's out there. We're going to explore space. Always the questing heart. So I think that it captures a lot of what Rahner's thought is all about. You know, there was that line I liked so much when asked if he was a Christian. He says, I am a Christian in order to become one. It captures both ideas. I am a Christian, I affirm that, but in order to become one, in order to carry on the quest to get to what's contained in that ideal of being a Christian. It's one of the ways we look at the New Testament as a document of ideals, a statement of how life ought to be, of where we want to move toward. I am a Christian in order to become one, Rahner said. Now we've been looking at this quest from various aspects. You know, the search last week for a genuine kind of charity. And tonight we're looking at the question of a liturgical piety. We're trying to figure out tonight how we're supposed to relate to the liturgy, to the sacraments, to the Eucharist, to the official prayer life of the Church. I'm going to repeat some things that I've said before about Rahner to try to locate us here. Some people know that while I was doing some writing on Rahner, I lived in Munich, and near the house where Rahner lived, and I ate my main meal there with them each day, and I celebrated the Mass at noon. We'd have liturgy before we ate, and it was an important community event. It was a Jesuit house, maybe 50 Jesuits living in this big house, and the interesting thing was that Rahner, who lived right in the building, was not there for the noon Mass. Mostly because he had said Mass early in the morning by himself. I once asked him how he wrote so many books, and he said, well, I used to get up early. And I said, what time do you get up now? He said, well, 6:30. Now that he was retired, he got up at 6:30. Well, but he would, as part of his routine, celebrate the Eucharist early in the morning. And it was always something, you know, of a strange paradox, because the man had written so much about the importance of the communal celebration of the liturgy, of group activity, helped so many of us see that clearly, and yet found his own piety to be much more individualistic. And he would write about that, talk about it, saw himself as a 19th century person, as a throwback to the individualism of a previous age. He thought he was quite different in his outlook from the young Jesuits who lived in the house with him. Although he liked them very much, it wasn't a turnout. He liked to go on walks with them, and I noticed that in his presence they would speak up. He was starting to get a little hard of hearing. They would speak louder and include him. They thought of him as a giant and as a marvelous man, and he loved them. He never drove a car, And so he would like to get the young guys to drive, and I was going to go faster and so on. But he saw them as different. He saw them as having much more of a sense of community than he did. In the house there, they had little living cells. Out of these 50 people, I don't remember how it was exactly, but 5 of them might be living close together in this building, and they would have their own prayer groups and so on. It was a small cell within the larger grouping. And Ronner did not belong to a cell like that. He found it interesting that others did, and felt that it was the wave of the future or the new kind of piety that would be developed. And then I will repeat another story again that, however, the one time I did celebrate the Eucharist with him was on Holy Thursday, when he joined the whole of the community there and preached a homily. And it really was, to me, an edifying kind of experience. It was marvelous thing to behold, and he put great effort into that homily for the group and spoke very simply about the meaning of Holy Thursday. So he did have his times when he could participate in the larger group and get something out of it. I never did see how he celebrated the Eucharist if he was not the presider. He preached, but he wasn't the main celebrant. So I never did see how he handled the larger liturgy. Well, that's the man who we're sort of looking to for some answers here. I think in many ways his theory is much better than his practice on this whole question. So we want to look now at a quest for a liturgical piety, of how we're going to relate to the sacramental life of the church in a better way. And I want to take up a number of problem areas connected with that and look at some of the responses that Ronner makes to it, and we'll do our usual thing of stopping after each one and spending a little time in questions and discussion. So the first problem area, I think, is the fact that many people just don't find the liturgy to be especially prayerful. There's some people who have just turned it off entirely. I mean, they just don't like to go to Mass anymore. They will say things like, I don't get anything out of it. It's dull. It's boring. It doesn't mean anything to me. At one extreme, it becomes sort of a charge of that people there are hypocritical. You know, that all those people just go there for show. They dress up, and they're just there because they have to, or they're just there because there's a law. And I'm not into that. I'm freer than that. I'm above that kind of routine action. So I just don't go anymore. But many people have dropped away. They haven't dropped out of Christianity, you understand. They haven't quit praying. Yes, a lot of those same people. I think there was a study down in New York of many of the unchurched, especially young people who didn't go anymore. And one of the common denominators of those young people was that they prayed a lot. They were into prayer, liked to pray, thought Jesus was great, were into Christianity, but just didn't like the communal kind of celebration. Well, so they just don't come anymore. Now, there's another group, I think, of people who would say, well, I go there, and I do it because it's the right thing to do, because that's what we Catholics are about, because there's a law to do so, or because my family expects it, or I like to be there with my husband, or I'm a good example to my children, all kind of reasons. But if you ask them about what goes on at the Mass, they will say it's not a particularly prayerful time for me. I can't really get into it. I can't meditate. I can't reflect. I can't pray from my heart. It's too distracting. I mean, we're up and down. We're saying all these different prayers, and people are bugging me to shake my hand throughout the Mass, and there's all this singing, and I just really don't find it to be prayerful. I mean, it's all right, and I like to go there with my family. It's a nice family event, but if you ask me about it, do I pray while I'm there, or really feel something deep in my heart of relationship to God, the answer comes back no. There's a lot of good people like that who simply don't have a particular feel for the liturgy. They like to pray by themselves, and they end up getting more out of it. Well, out of a Ronerian framework, I want to try to respond to that kind of situation. I suppose the first thing I would say is I think that's all very understandable. I don't think everyone has an equal need for the liturgy. nor an equal capacity to appreciate it. It's just like not everyone appreciates poetry, which poetry moves in that world of symbol and myth and so on, pointing of language that unveils in a way. A lot of people simply don't have an ear for it. They're not into it. And I think the same way is there for liturgy. Some people simply are not attuned to it for one reason or another. They don't understand what it's about. They might be very holy, in fact, very close to God, but it's just not their way of prayer. And I think we have to allow for that. And I don't think we all got to be really terrific about liturgy. One of the phrases in the Second Vatican Council that bothered Rahner was the phrase in the Liturgy Constitution that said that the liturgy is the font and the summit of the Christian life. He didn't like that phrase. He thought it was overblown. He thought it was too much. This saying the Eucharist, I think the precise phrase was the Eucharist was the font and the epitome, I lost the right word, the high point of the Christian life. Summit was the word they used, yeah. Font and summit. Well, Rahner, he thought that was too much emphasis on liturgy. To him, he would probably rather say the life of charity is the real summit of the Christian life. Living life is more important than ritualizing. So you get a different kind of emphasis there. But I think that the general point I'm trying to make is that it's not surprising that a lot of our young people, a lot of people generally who just don't particularly get into the liturgical kind of action. When I say liturgy, I hope I'm not losing people. The word liturgy is an umbrella term that generally refers to the official worship of the church, like the Mass and the sacramental life. That's the official kind of prayer, and that's sort of talked about in distinction to the private kinds of prayers that we do in our own way, in our own words, and the way we want to do it. The liturgy is set. There's books that tell you how to do it, formats you're supposed to follow. It's that is a group kind of activity. So I think we need to keep that liturgical prayer in mind. We don't all have the same capacity for it that way. Then also, I think that there's people who legitimately need a distance from all of that, who just need to get away from it. I think a lot of the young people are like that. They have to know that they won't get hit by lightning if they don't go to Mass on Sunday. I think they almost have to work their way through that. There's a lot of times in dealing with young people when it seems, at least to me as an advisor or a counselor, that it makes a lot of sense for them to say, I'm not going for a while. No, I'm just not going. I'm going to declare my independence from that. No, I'm going to just stay away on purpose. Not going away from Christianity, not going away from prayer, but I'm not going to join in that group. It's like they say, well, I've been doing it all the time. My folks forced me to go there. I had to be there. I hated it. It was dull. It was routine. I didn't get anything out of it. They were never talking to me. Therefore, I have to get my distance from it. And I believe that that's a legitimate thing. Rahner's written an important article on the Sunday precept, which tries to put into context that law that we have that you have to go to Mass on Sunday. And Rahner makes a big point, of course, we all understand that that is a human law, a church law, and not, as we say, a divine law. Church could decide differently tomorrow about whether we had to go to Mass on Sunday or not. We're not likely to do that, I don't think. And Rahner is of the opinion that it probably is not wise to make that change now. It's a very torturous argument, and you can tell he's not really sure of himself. But he, in general, I would say, doesn't think that we ought to have a big move to get rid of that obligation. But what he wants to make sure we understand is that it's a church law, and church laws, do not bind in serious inconvenience, as we say. In other words, there could well be a situation where it's exactly proper, moral, the right thing to do, not to go. That's the judgment that a person makes in relationship to this law, which generally binds us, but for any number of reasons simply does not apply in a particular individual case. And I think very often young people that I see just need to do that. I don't think one would think of them committing a mortal sin by not going. They simply are in the process, the journey, the quest for a more authentic religious life, to kind of, in other words, get their heads together or understand what life is all about. On the other hand, just to fill out the picture of that law, whether you got a church law or not, what is clear is that we human beings have an obligation to work at our relationship with God. And those of us who are church members have an obligation and responsibility to do it in the community, in the church, to try to carry this out. So I don't mean that my previous remarks do not give us license to say, well, worship is out, liturgy means nothing to me, therefore I just go my own way. What one has to try to figure out is, how can it bring me closer to God? How can it somehow enliven the spiritual life inside of me? Well, that raises all kind of practical problems for parents of 15-year-old girls who are trying to figure out what to do when they don't want to go to Mass or something. There's what do we do with the young people? And, what age do you allow that, and how do you handle all that? Tremendously difficult problems that have to be solved according to the personality, character, temperament, and so on of the young people involved. And we can perhaps deal with questions or comments on that, but surely that problem was raised. Secondly, by way of response to this kind of problem, it does seem important for us as human beings, as Christians, to be able to express ourselves more openly about our religious feelings. I think it generally could say in our culture that we haven't learned to do that well. There's a reticence about talking about religion in public. There's a feeling that many people have that it's too much. You shouldn't express yourself religiously. You shouldn't talk politics or religion, as my barber told me not long ago. Just don't do that in public. So it causes fights or misunderstandings. So it's hard for people to do this. One of Ronner's suggestions is that we learn how to pray with the people we're close to, that we're able to express ourselves that way. Often, I use this example a lot. I remember being at someone's house, and it became time we were going to eat, and then prayer before meals. The husband and wife took turns saying a prayer and used it as a way of sort of stating what was important to them through their day and what really mattered. And it was a very touching kind of thing. I suppose maybe it was touching just from the viewpoint that not many people seem to be able to do that with ease. So Ronner says that one of the ways you get ready for liturgy is to be able to pray in your family out loud and in common. One thinks of the home masses in this regard. I know for my family, home masses have been, really a gathering point, central point when the family is together. They're often, very emotional kinds of affairs, and so on. It seemed like a way that people had of learning a little bit about the power of the liturgy. I think I had a point. I want to stress that in another context here. But the point here is to learn to express ourselves. And I suppose this becomes very hard. One has to figure out, what is possible that way. Maybe some of us need to press ourselves a little bit. A lot of people have joined prayer groups and found it to be a very uplifting experience. You have a proliferation of those. Many people are afraid of that at the beginning. It's hard to get into it, and you wonder, well, what am I going to say, and so on. But many people find to pray out loud with others is energizing, that one gets the strength from the other people there. So one way we're going to improve the situation is to develop more of this communal type praying together. Third thing I was thinking of is the kind of build in more of this heartfelt prayer in the Mass as part of it. Now, I don't know that these people who say they don't get into it couldn't do better with it. Maybe there can be trigger points throughout the Mass that move one to a more personal kind of feeling about God. Maybe some people would use that, the Holy Holy at the Mass, as a time to really think beyond just whether you're standing or sitting, all the people around, or just whether they're singing or they're saying it, but the real moment, that's my time to say, Lord, I praise you for your goodness. And it just sort of wells up. Or some people, I'm sure, consecration time is that way. Oh, there's a special prayer that I try to say just privately at that moment. When we say the memorial after the chalice up, and then the next we move into the memorial acclamation. I mean, there's a point there, a trigger point for me, where I try to remember my father and say a prayer for him and try to be in communion with him. But it's like you get to that point, you might be distracted, but you get to that point and it brings one back. I think communion is just, I'm not, we push a lot for people to sing during communion, when going to communion. It's a group activity and so on. I think that's marvelous. But I certainly have a feel for the person who wants to go back and be quiet for a few minutes and reflect and pray to the Lord, who's close within, and perhaps it's a special kind of moment for people as well. The general principle I'm trying to develop is that we find our trigger points right within the liturgy that try to deepen it, that make it a more personal prayer kind of experience. It's interesting to try to pick some out that might work better. The fourth point that I have in mind is that maybe people would get more out of the liturgy if they put more into it. I have this theory that liturgy works well when people come to it with a set of expectations. That what makes liturgy work is that there's a certain percentage of the people there who want to put into it, who want to make it work. They're sort of rooting for it to happen. They're expecting something good. So therefore they sing, or they pray, or they try to be warm in the greeting of peace and so on. And there's sort of a critical mass that way that is reached, a certain number where it happens. And I believe that when you get a congregation like that, that's putting something into it and setting the expectation that even if the liturgy itself isn't particularly good, if the homily is off the mark or not well prepared, it doesn't really make a lot of difference. Because what happens is the congregation supplies the Spirit. They supply the energy. They achieve a receptivity which allows God to act. So I think that one of the secrets of getting more out of probably anything in life is to put into it. A lot of times when maybe people complain, I don't get anything out of Mass. Well, what does that mean? Maybe they're not supposed to get anything particularly out of it. Maybe the right question is, what did you put into it? What did you supply? What kind of energy did you put forth to make this whole experience be a good one for other people? Maybe someone who didn't know thought that way, like, well, I'm going to really pray for that lonely widower over there who I can see is feeling bad. I'm going to say a prayer for him during Mass. And maybe it all changes. One feels different about the whole liturgical experience. So the putting something in seems to be a part of it. And finally, in responding to this, it seems crucial that people actually have a good experience of the liturgy to know its power. I know I was a priest for a number of years and said many, many Masses before I really ever felt or knew that power. I mean, that might sound strange to people, but it has to happen. I mean, I think that happened to me when the Bishop Raring sent me out to Denver back in the middle 60s to study to be able to be a campus minister. And I remember being out there, and we had these small group Masses. I mean, we were studying together, and it was, I suppose, a beautiful setting and all of this. But we had these Masses, and they were just terrific. I mean, it was different, really, from anything else that I had really experienced at Mass. I mean, it was powerful, it was uplifting, it was emotional, it was Spirit-filled, and it was really, for me, the first time, I suppose, even after saying these hundreds of Masses or more, that of what the power of the liturgy was. So I think that maybe we can't know this unless we have a real experience of it. And that's the great value of the small group movements we have, of Curcio or Marriage Encounter or Christ Renews His Parish, or all these small group efforts to get people into one place where they can feel bonded together, can let go a little bit, can let the Spirit take over, can afford to be a little emotional, can afford to speak out a little bit in a dialogue homily, can risk a little of that, and in the process reap some of the reward. So I think that maybe some of these people, our young people, one of the best things we do for them, I think, are these texts or these searches or these exercise weekends that we have where they feel this power of liturgy. Then the hope is that one would be able to bring that kind of anticipation to the larger group and be able to get something out of the regular kind of masses, probably especially by putting something into it. So in this first part, I'm talking about people who simply don't find it to be a particularly prayerful experience. Some have turned it off entirely, some sort of go through the routine, and how could we make it better? I don't know if this comes up in one of my previous points here, or later points. What I was flashing on, of course, is the importance of preparing when one comes to that Mass. Maybe that part of putting more into it would be some people would read the Scriptures ahead of time, or while they're driving in the car, try to have a few seconds of quiet, or get there early and quiet down and get ready for it. A lot of times whatever we do right beforehand seems to have a bearing on how it actually comes out. Well, I'm going to stop there, and let's do our one-to-one discussion for a couple minutes. Maybe people could pick up and share a little idea on how you try to get more out of it or make it a more prayerful kind of experience. I'm not sure if everyone heard the comment, but it's right. I suppose one way of summarizing it is that Catholics often don't appreciate the Eucharist because they've had it all their lives. Cradle Catholics, because it's always been there. And that perhaps one of the ways one increases the appreciation is by not having it for a while. And the bouncing off of honor the centrality of the Eucharist. Well, I think that an interesting thing to sort of check out, I think the Eucharist, the liturgical action, is sort of built into the bones and blood of cradle Catholics. I guess my own reading of it would be not so much don't appreciate it, but it's more like the air one breathes, it's simply there. So that, Catholics just associate the Mass with whatever it is that's important to them. So if they're going to get married, they think of doing it during Mass. Or if they want to pray for their deceased ones, they offer a Mass up for them. Or at First Communion, obviously, a shaping event in our lives in the context of the Eucharist. That's a difficult thing to say. Catholics simply are, accepted, I think, as part of life. It's simply our main way of worshiping. We tried this with what we call para-liturgical services. A lot of people felt that, like during Lent, let's not have Mass. Let's teach the people to appreciate what we call para-liturgical services, like you'd come together and read the Scriptures and pray, and you wouldn't have communion or anything. You'd have a different kind of service. And I think that most parishes found that to be very difficult to make work. And a Lenten service that incorporated the Mass seemed to do better. It seemed to be there's a natural way the Catholics had of living out the faith or of experiencing it. Clearly, the ritual, symbolic side of it, the communion thing, is what is important to Catholics. If you're going to try to distinguish out Catholics and Protestants, again, I've often talked about this, but that Protestantism really is a religion of the Word. The pulpit is the important thing, the Scriptures, the proclamation, the preaching. You know, people are picked for the posts in the congregation by pulpit committees, or one of the main criterion is how well they preach. That really becomes a central point within Protestantism. And in contrast to that, Catholicism really is a symbolic religion. It's very much liturgically oriented. As I often say, Catholics put up with crummy sermons for years and just didn't really much care about it. You know, it was just a matter of, well, I go there to go to communion. You know, that guy wants to get up there and rattle off for a while. I grab a few winks or close out my mind and do something else, or do some of my rosary or something, you know, but you don't want to say, well, we're not going to have communion today. I mean, that would be horrible. So, I mean, I think there is a way in which, I'm just trying to highlight, in which the Eucharistic piety, I think, is in the bones and the blood of Catholic people. It's simply the way that we generally think about celebrating. I think a further question is the quality of it. You know, of how well we've learned to mine its riches, I think is a different story. I don't want to dispute your point. I mean, I think that any time it's possible to get used to something. One of the sections I want to deal here with is the question of frequency of sacraments. Maybe I'll bounce off of your remarks further at that point. But I think your remark is well taken that you know, absence often helps us appreciate something more. I suppose if you were in Brazil and didn't have a priest come very often for Mass and couldn't celebrate it, that when he did get there, you probably wouldn't miss, or more likely to be there, more likely to get something out of it. Maybe we'll have our chance for that in the United States before long. Since in the year 2000, prediction is we'll have half as many priests as we've got right now. And in some dioceses, 1/3 as many by the year 2000. So maybe we'll get a chance to experience what you're talking about there, and to learn something about the appreciating it. But I want to say more about that when we get to the frequency question, because I think it is an important aspect. Yeah. Yeah, people recognize the comment is made about the catechumenate, the RCIA program, the program we use now to initiate people into the Catholic Church. That what's supposed to happen, as part of it is, the catechumens don't go to communion. They are excluded from the full participation. And supposedly it's a very striking, symbolic way of making a point along that line, and probably gives that experience of longing for, wanting to be in full communion with the group. I remember one young man telling me he was going through a catechumenate program years ago, and just told me that he didn't really much care what I said, but this going to communion was really getting important to him, and even before he was received, the Easter time was coming up. He couldn't be received till later on. He said he's going. He just couldn't stand the alienation anymore, couldn't stand the lack of communion. It was so important to him. So evidently feeling the kind of thing that you're describing. Deprivation, I mean, I guess a lot of times we don't appreciate what we've got until it's taken away in some way. Let me go on to another concern here about, remember what we're after is, easy point, how are we going to participate in Mass better? How are we going to get more out of it? I put it in terms of searching for a liturgical piety, searching for a spirituality that's nurtured by the liturgy, that finds strength and comfort in it, and where it is a source of growth for us. So we're figuring that maybe, I guess one of the premises is it doesn't do as much of that as we would like. We don't fully tap the potential of the sacramental life. And I'm looking for why that might be. So a second reason has to do with magical notions of the sacrament. That is, the kind of common notion that sacraments work automatically. We had a phrase in Latin that many people learned, ex opere operato, which meant the sacraments work by the work being done. And it conveyed to many Catholic people the sense that sacraments infallibly give grace, that they automatically give it. And there's a certain amount of it one gets. And so we had very interesting practices around that. For example, the notion of going to 3 Masses on All Souls Day and doing it rapidly. I remember the pastor told me the first All Souls Day, remember, get 3 in 1 hour. Well, I mean, get out there and finish it up. So then people would, get more in. I think that there was connected with that this sort of magical notion that if you got 3 in, you got more grace, probably triple what you got for 1. Just about. So automatically grace is given by sacrament. Now I think maybe there is a more subtle form of that same, what I would consider temptation, and that is that the expectation that liturgy will often be, or almost always be, a peak experience, that it's supposed to be some terrific, uplifting experience all the time. You're supposed to just walk in and sort of magically the thing's going to take off and the spirit's going to soar and you're going to get on high and walk out ready to take the world on. I think that, at least some people, I don't know how common that is. I think it's probably common for people who have had intense liturgical experiences, maybe who have been on a Crescio and it's been terrific and they want every Mass to be like that. Or have had some terrific liturgical experience in a home Mass and say every parish Mass ought to be like that. This magical notion might be connected in with a theology that says that the sacraments are the exclusive channel of God's grace. We have this maybe in the sacrament of penance in the Catholic mind. That is the idea that the only way one could be forgiven is by going to confession. That is the exclusive channel of the grace of forgiveness to us human beings. That there really isn't any good access to God's blessing or grace apart from those channels of grace. Even to go deeper with what I think is behind some of the theological problems is this: the great emphasis on in the sacramental teachings that we've had of the sacraments as being causes of grace. When St. Thomas Aquinas wrote his treatise on the sacraments, he had a nice balance between sacraments as the cause of grace and sacraments as signs of grace. And when the commentators, often called the manualists of the Aquinas died in 1274, when the manualists got a hold of that and taught people like me in the seminary, the whole idea of sacraments as signs fell out. There was almost no talk of that. And sacraments as the cause of grace took up almost the whole course that we studied on the sacraments. Therefore, when preachers would talk about it, or teachers in the classroom, influenced by the seminary training, were always big on this idea: sacraments cause grace. They give grace, ex opere operato. They automatically are the vehicle of God's grace. As I'm portraying all that, I think that's out of balance. I think that's perhaps one of our problems, why we don't get more out of the sacraments. Anytime we expect life to go automatically or things to work magically, then we don't end up making the most out of what we could do here. Marriage is going to work automatically, magically aren't going to work because the people aren't going to put the energy into it. So I think it goes with so many things in life. So I don't know if people were actually able to follow that or not, but do you see a little bit of it? You're going to go to confession and get God's grace, whether you're sorry or not particularly, or whether you've decided to do better or not. It's just grace of forgiveness is automatically there. Well, I mean, if you can appreciate that problem and all, I mean, how do people experience this generally? Well, I tried to specify that by saying that, the expectation that it will be good always, peak experiences and so on. Well, let me try to work out what I think is a better theology of grace and a more balanced way of understanding it. First of all the idea is that sacraments, of course, give grace to us only to the degree that we are receptive and open. I mean, God doesn't force His blessings on us. We have to have our open heart. We got to be ready to receive. Otherwise, nothing happens. That was the fallacy in saying we're going to get triple the grace from 3 Masses. The question was, and Ronner pointed out in a famous essay, you can only get more grace if somehow you were more receptive, more open to receiving God's grace. In this kind of picture, it's not like God's grace is up there in some reservoir, and the sacraments are like a conduit, a pipe coming down, and in a spigot at the bottom, and you can open it up and get so much out. The image changes in this contemporary theology to saying, well, grace is like the air we breathe. It's around us all the time. It's what supports and sustains us. Sometimes I haven't thought of this for years. I used to give people this example. I draw a picture and say, here was a guy swimming in the water. Maybe he was in danger of drowning, and over here was an island. And the question is, if you try to, what in that picture represents God to you? Well, I often thought it to be very revealing because the common response was, well, the island was God. That was refuge. That was a point of safety in the world. If you could just swim over there, you would be saved. And that is one theological viewpoint. But the contemporary theology that I'm trying to describe would say the real thing that represents God in the picture is the water. The water which buoys us up, which sustains us if we keep moving. Well, in the water, it's a better image because it's all around us, because we're surrounded by it. God isn't one point in the picture. He's the whole of the picture. He's everything surrounding us. So in this picture, in other words, what we're saying is that we're surrounded by God's grace. It's like the air we breathe. We've got to open up our lungs. We've got to open up our hearts and let it come in. So we're only going to get more grace to the degree that we are receptive to it. So someone who says, I'm going to go to one Mass on All Souls Day and really get into it and pray and think of my loved ones and really try to make it a good experience is going to be far better off than someone who rushes through 3 of them. Just to take an older example from our liturgical piety. Same thing goes with the sacrament of confession. The important thing is whether one's trying to do better, in touch with one's failings, making a firm purpose of doing better, and so on. Second theological point I'm making is that sacraments really cause grace by being good signs. The more vital the sign, the more opportunity it has to open us up, and the more receptive then we are to God's grace. In other words, it seems clear to me that in a very tangible, empirical way, sacraments cause grace by being good signs. I often use the example of just thinking of myself that one of the problems that priests have is having to say so many Masses. That it's hard to get up for Mass. To me, Mass is something that the leader is supposed to get into and try to draw others in. I mean, it's a draining experience. You got to work at it. I mean, that's how my view is of what the leader of the liturgy is. It isn't just saying these prayers and keeping your hands at a certain place or something. It's drawing in. It's trying to make it work, and it's trying to be open, receptive to the Spirit. Well, I mean, there'd be times when the last thing in the world I want to do is have another Mass. I mean, it's too much. You can't get up that often. It's like trying to get up for a ball game every day. It's hard to do. So the problem is getting up. Well, one of my experiences would be a time when I don't feel like it and find it hard to get up, too many Masses, is you go over there And someone in the way says, "Hi, Father, how you doing? Good to see you." You know, you can tell that they're sort of happy to be coming to Mass. And then you start, and the opening song is good, and people are singing it, and you start to think, well, maybe I could get into this. You know? And then you get up, and the first reader really takes it seriously. You can tell that she's prepared, and she knows the meaning of it, and she's reading that thing, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, geez, my problems aren't all that big. I could get on with this thing. You know, and as you go along, what happens is the very power of the sign, all of the elements, the liturgy, the reading of the Scriptures, the sharing in communion, the singing, the greeting of peace, all those things simply open one up a little bit. One quits worrying about one's own problems, one quits spiraling inward, and the liturgy just sort of pulls one apart or begins to energize one. And now the last thing I want to do is have another Mass, and suddenly now I'm feeling like I want to get into this. Like I'm being pulled along by a power I don't even understand. Something else is happening here. I don't feel so despondent. I'm getting more energy. Well, that to me, everyone could talk out of their own experience that way, is what it means to say that how sacraments cause grace. They cause it by being good signs. The better the sign, the more vital, the more communal, the more compelling the sign, the more the heart is softened, and the will is opened up, and the total person is ready to receive God's grace. Big sacraments cause grace by being good signs. I think it's a perfectly clear theological point. You can say it the other way. Walk in feeling like that, and no one's into it. It's like pulling teeth to get anybody involved, you know, and people look like they don't want to be there, and 3/4 are falling asleep during the homily, and the singing's lousy. Being the exclusive channel of God's grace, in any kind of numerical sense, sacraments are the extraordinary means of God's grace. I mean, there's more people being forgiven who are not going to confession than people who are going to confession. In other words, God's giving His grace of forgiveness to human beings whenever they ask for it. Any human being who ever lived who was sorry for their failings and expressed that, felt it, had it, whoever was running this show, received forgiveness. Well, God does not deny that. So most people who were ever forgiven were forgiven apart from the sacrament of penance. Most people who were nourished, given energy to keep going and putting one foot in front of the other, sustained, are energized apart from the celebration of the Eucharist. So that what sacraments are the visibility of what God is doing always and everywhere in the world. They are the reminder of what is happening to all human beings who have achieved a degree of receptivity to God's grace. I suppose the logical question that comes from that then, why have them? Well, why do we have them if you can get forgiven without going to confession? If you can get nourished without having the Mass, you can get healed without having extreme unction or anointing of the sick. Well, I think the answer to that question and the way we set up a proper liturgical piety is that the sacraments are for our benefit. They're good for us because we're bodily social creatures. We need them as the reminder. It's the same thing you could say about a good marriage. In a good marriage, what really counts is that the two people love one another. That's what's really there. That exists apart from saying it or symbolizing it in sexual activity. It's there. That's what's important. And yet, we all know it's crucial that it be expressed, that it be said in words and in action. And what that word and action does is to give expression to the deeper sentiment. That's what makes it authentic. And in turn, it has the power to increase it. So the man who said, "I love you," to his wife, is reminded of responsibilities, is reminded of who he is in this relationship, is reminded of what he has received from his wife, all kinds of good things that stir up the inner sentiment of love. In other words, if you ask me what's the most important thing, to say I love you or to love, obviously the most important thing is to be a lover, to be in love, to be in that kind of relationship. That's primary. That's the most important thing. The words, however, although they are secondary, are important. They're significant. Why? Because they interact as the expression of that love, and they stir up that love. That's the way I would like to see sacraments. They have the same necessity as saying, I love you. They have the same kind of necessity as fitting in with human nature, being the human way we express ourselves, and being God's gift to us of a way of stirring up proper sentiments in our heart. Now, I believe that we would do better, therefore, if we could maintain that kind of theology. We would get away from magic and from automatic kind of things. We would remember that, it's not always going to be some great peak experience. The liturgies maybe are more like plateaus at times. They're sort of nice and gentle. The symbolic expression of love in marriage is not always going to be terrific, not always a peak experience, in the same way with liturgy. But that doesn't deny its importance. Still is significant for stirring up the sentiment. So I think this theology would help. And then maybe once we had that more in order, we would then, find our ways to prepare better for the sacraments. I said that in the last segment, but I was specifying, I was thinking about kind of things we do for baptism these days, where parents are instructed, where parents help plan the ceremony and get into it. And then it becomes a sign, the mother sits there and says, well, what's this white dress? I ask, well, what about this white garment? Oh, her grandmother made that. Her grandmother's over there. She begins to talk about it. It becomes personalized. The people then pick the scripture readings. They say, well, we have this reading because it reminds us of our obligations as parents. And it just takes on a different character. So through the preparation, instead of just whipping in and saying a few quick words, pouring water and getting out, goodbye, the sign is enriched. And once the sign is enriched and the parents get more into it, it's more emotional, it's more memorable, they remember their responsibilities more, the sign is at work, and the grace connected with baptism is all the more intense and powerful and extensive and long-lasting. Example of how preparation would help us to get around this sort of magical notion of what the sacraments are all about. Same thing would go for spending time and examining our conscience before we go to confession, especially in trying to get at our deeper motivations of what makes us tick, of why we fall into this particular pattern that is destructive for us, and so on. We'd read over the scripture passage before Mass, a whole bunch of things that we would do if we had this notion that it doesn't happen automatically. We've got to work at it, prepare, do some study. So there we have a theology designed to overcome magic. You understand the principle, the essence of the whole thing is that God wants to give himself to us. He communicates himself to us, and that's what we call grace. We live and swim and move in that grace. Sacraments are the visibility of that grace. Sacraments are the symbolic form of that grace. They're the reminders of what God is doing always and everywhere. And as reminders, they have the power to stir up our heart, to open us up, so that we have a greater receptivity, so it can just flood in, much as the air would flood in as we open our lungs. Well, let's stop here again. Let's talk for a minute or so, and then we'll take a short break. But why don't we do our one-to-one just for a minute, then we'll get started with that, then we'll take a break, okay? Let me make a general comment. I had a very good comment at the break that I want to use as a springboard for a larger thing. And I think it really does fit right in here. It is a general criticism that is mounted against the theology of honor, which after all is what we're talking about here. And this is going to be hard to explain So stick with it for a while. We have to bound. It's made by a fellow by the name of von Balthasar, who was a contemporary of Rahner's and also a well-known German theologian. And it has been picked up by some people here in the United States. And it would be something like this, that with the kind of theology of the sacraments that I explained earlier, that one would end up missing the fact that sacraments create a symbolic world of their own that has a life of its own. And that world is shaping and determining and is influencing our psyche. In other words, it's not just that we are living in the world and earning a living and raising a family and studying or whatever, and then come and symbolize what is going on there, but that the sacramental life as a whole, the general regular celebration of the Eucharist and the baptism, all of that, creates, as I'm saying, this symbolic world. I suppose, using the example of the marriage, you can say, well, the act of intercourse could symbolize what's going on in the world, but one might also talk about the marriage partner's sex life as having, in a sense, a life of its own, having some of its own dynamics, and not simply being related to or a way of symbolizing the rest of the marriage relationship. Well, the feeling is by some people that, the kind of theology that I enunciated before, that symbolic world is lost, that the full power of what the sacramental system does for us is somehow diminished. Well, I just, at this point, just put that before you. I myself do not think that that's saying anything that doesn't fit into the analysis I made before. I don't know if you can see that. I don't know how to make it more concrete. I think the example of saying that the marriage partners have a sex life that it's not distinguishable from the rest of life, and yet it might have some of its own dynamics. It might have its own contours and so on, and shaping influence. And to talk about the sacraments, therefore, is creating a whole symbolic world, gives them a greater power this way. It tells us more about how people who grew up in a tradition end up being influenced by that tradition, precisely by being in touch with that symbolic activity all the time. So that the person who knows that world would know something that other people don't know, that we are deprived of that it would have a source and power of energy that others would be lacking in a way. It's a very important criticism, and it's one that needs to be taken very seriously. It was made in very helpful terms to me at the break, and is also being made by competent theologians today. I don't know exactly what that means to anybody about getting up on Monday morning, but if we try to look at the full way we are shaped, maybe one way one gets it is in thinking of marriage counseling, or when you have a Catholic married to a Protestant, that sometimes one will see that there are sort of deep down differences in approaches to life and so on that can be detected by the difference in the relationship to liturgy. I mean, it's as simple as saying that when Protestants come to Catholic weddings, they think it's cluttered and overdone, up and down, and everything else. When Catholics go to Protestant weddings, they have a feeling like something's missing. Did it end already? Why are we sitting here in rows eating cookies now? In other words, there's each part. I didn't mean that. Each grouping finds something that is not too intelligible to them about what goes on. The Protestants sitting in church saying, "Well, why are they up and down so much? And why is it all taking so long?" And In other words, if you start looking at it that way, and we have repeated experiences like that over a period of time, could well be that our psyche is shaped, our consciousness is determined, our sort of worldview is somehow influenced by the type of sacramental life that we've known. Maybe that's a way of saying how it has a power of its own, a life of its own. All of that by way of counterpoint, I think, to the kind of Ronerian approach to the sacraments I was saying, which fundamentally says we live our life and we're shaped by the culture in which we live, the world in which we live, and we take what is good and valuable there and we bring it to the liturgy, and in the liturgy we celebrate it or symbolize it or offer it up to God. I have the feeling by looking at faces that point is completely escaped. However, to some people it's important. And it's officially on the tape, so there's nothing I can do about it. The next third point that I want to bring up, and maybe it does relate somehow, that is the relationship between liturgy and life. Obviously, the problem here is that the two get divorced. That going to Mass doesn't have much to do with what is going on in the rest of one's life. The image I very often use is that people often oscillate. They oscillate between the regular, profane, everyday life of family, of work, of recreation, and then swing over to another kind of world, which is the world of liturgy, which is the sacred world. In an older day, you would see it in people using a different tone of voice and talking to nuns and priests than they would anybody else, or using a different language that they would use in that case, or simply adopting a different mood or tone when they come to Mass. Somehow their relationship with their kids changed as they walked into church, and then returned to normal as they came back out. It's like moving between two different worlds, and many people, and I think this is really true for years before the Second Vatican Council, maybe after, just saw nothing wrong with that. They just thought that's how you do it, that you oscillate, and people were comfortable doing it. Didn't have any problem with talking to Father in a different way than they talked to everyone else. That just was ordinary. Then we got a younger generation who began saying, no, that's hypocritical. Hey, man, I'm authentic. I don't oscillate, man. I'm integrated with it. I'm not into hypocrisy. And so we got people who didn't want to oscillate anymore, And we began to see, I think, something about this separation. Well, maybe it comes out in another way, where people were convinced that whatever went on in church, in preaching or whatever, had nothing to do with the social, economic, or political order. Now that's still common today. Many people, if you preach about the bishop's peace pastoral, they're upset because they think you can talk about prayer in church, might be able to talk about family life in church, but don't talk about politics or military matters, or economic matters, or social questions, or racial justice, or apartheid. That's got nothing to do with church. I really found that in not just in Catholic church. I remember they talk in a Presbyterian church on the peace pastoral of the bishops, and and one guy got up and said, well, that's all nice stuff, it sounds great and so on, but that's got nothing to do with real life. And that's split again. That's that dichotomy. No connection between liturgy and life. Now you can look at it the other side and say, the problem of everyday life is that we lose the sense of mystery. So we walk through our days just on a superficial level, that we never think deeply, don't feel down in our gut, that we don't think about thanking anyone, whoever, for what's going on, that we have a totally secularized language for dealing with whatever happens. We have no way of talking about freedom, or the deeper meanings of sexuality or death or any of the things that really count, so that one gets a sense of an existence that's completely profane, that is emptied of all mystery, of everything that is beyond the rational, is simply out. And my phrase that I like to use is the eclipse of mystery. Mystery is covered over, forgotten. It simply is no longer part of our conscious awareness. So it's possible to walk through our day like that. And it's possible, Ryder makes this interesting point. He says we can become so used to that, so much caught up in the routine and the profane character of life, that we no longer know that something's missing. That we're now no longer in touch with the fact that we're impoverished. We've got no sense that anything's wrong. It's just a feeling that's how life is. It's a rat race, and it's monotonous, and it's routine, and it's superficial, and that's how it is. And that's all it is. Yes, I mean, his point is you can even forget what it's like to live in a richer, deep way. It's like you work so hard, you're so busy, you go. I mean, after all, you forget what it means to just sit for 5 minutes and relax. And you know, you don't even try to do it anymore because you forgot how good it feels to do that. It just keeps it up with the rat race. I think that's a telling psychological point in our age, that we no longer even know that mystery is eclipsed. And that's sad. That's when a culture then is totally secularized. Then we're in a mess. Then the only people around who are the prophets who could call us out and say, this is stupid. I've been reading a lot of Thomas Merton again in connection with the weekend and treat I'm doing this Friday night and Saturday, all on Merton. And out of Lewis College, I suppose it's still possible to get in if you want to do these series. What? What do you mean? You can't get into this retreat? Oh. Well, you can't get moved to sleep, but you surely can sneak into the lesson. Well, I'm going to get in trouble now with the people who run this. Is that right? People were told you can't get in? Sorry about that. Yeah, I know somebody. What was it? I really am lost.
Eclipse of mystery.
Merton, yeah. Thank you. Merton, I mean, is the kind of guy in his writing, he looks at the world and can point out how silly so much of just the ordinary things are we do. And it's because he was sitting around praying a lot of times and contemplating. When he looked at the world, it looked pretty silly. That's the way people did things, ordinary routine things. He's a prophet type. It's like you can only people who can see how silly a lot of what we do is somebody who stepped back from it all, got quiet and prayed about it, got in touch with God and looked at it from that perspective. Everyone's running around here like there's no tomorrow or something. Why are these people so busy? Why are these people just so insensitive to other people around them? It doesn't make any sense. And so the point I'm making is we can go through the world profane and not even know that we're messed up. Think that this is how everyone lives. Well, the response to this is one of Rahner's most important themes about the sacraments, one he develops at great length, and that is, really gets specified with the Eucharist. He talks about the Eucharist as the sacrament of the everyday, the symbolization of our ordinary, routine existence. So what the Eucharist is supposed to do is to help to nourish us, give us strength, so that we can get through that monotonous routine existence, but so that we can also uncover the depths of it. So as we go through it, we can be reminded of what it's all about. We can remember what we are supposed to be doing. In other words, to go to Mass on Sunday means that we get the batteries charged up again. We get ourselves focused. We stop the action. I like this image. Stop action. Slow it all down for a while. We get in there, and it's not really important. I mean, it shouldn't be sort of how long it's lasting or what time is it, or all the other things that are pulling upon me. In Mass, we're supposed to be able to just calm ourselves, let the Spirit take over, do something useless. That's Merton again. What's neat about liturgy is that it doesn't do anything. It doesn't go anyplace. It doesn't accomplish anything. It's not useful. Merton says as soon as you start making prayer and liturgy useful, then in a way you're going to lose what it's all about. So when we get in there, it's supposed to have a different feel. It's like leisure. It's like strolling in the woods or looking at a painting when you can sit there as long as you want. You don't have another appointment in the next 15 minutes. When you can just be and exist and drink in and contemplate. Well, in other words, liturgy is supposed to give us a different feel so that we could take that back to our world and walk through our monotonous day and see depths there that we ordinarily miss, so that we would be more sensitive to the people around us, so we would remember to pray throughout the day. We remember to be grateful for the blessings and remember to try to carry our crosses with some grace and a feeling that the Lord is supporting us now. You see, liturgy, in other words, should just be countercultural in a way. It should be opposed to our ordinary way of thinking. And it strengthens the everyday simply because it is so different. Maybe that's usually we take our watches off during that. Not worry about that. Don't think that we're going to get in there and just, that's over with now. It's got, at its best, it should create a feeling of what leisure is, of what uselessness is, of how neat it is to do something that doesn't accomplish anything. It doesn't really do anything. It's a matter of being in the presence of God. And so what we're trying to do then is to get that kind of nourishment, that kind of new vision, and to take it to the world with us. Ronner likes to specify this in terms of carrying the cross. He said that when we go to Mass, we don't just celebrate the death of the Lord. We do that. Paul says we come there to proclaim the death of the Lord until he comes again. But Ronner says we also come there to proclaim our own death, to celebrate our own cross-bearing, to bring to that the harshness and the routine and the monotony of the everyday. One of the things Ronner keeps insisting on is that you can't escape from that. You can't make every day into a holiday. Same idea. You can't have peak experiences all the time. You can't have marvelous relationships. We're going to have abrasiveness. The ones that we care about are going to disappoint us. We all got jobs to do that we don't like to do. Another bed to make, meal to cook, article to write, all kind of stuff we don't like. And Ronner always says that the great problem of life is the attempt to escape from that. So for him, the essence of sin is to escape from reality. And what is needed is to keep in touch with reality. So he doesn't want liturgy just to be a time to get off by yourself and get escape from the world. He doesn't really want the liturgy to function that way for us. He wants the liturgy to give us the strength and vision to live the routine, to say some monotony in life is all right, that there's a lot of tasks I don't want to do, but I'm going to do them anyway. I'm going to be in bad moods, but I'm not going to inflict them on somebody else. That's the way that the liturgy begins to connect together for him. He's got this phrase, I'll sort of paraphrase it. It's not that God, through the Eucharist, intervenes to help us to live this alien, everyday life. These are one of these subtle points again, okay? Not like you go to Mass to get God to intervene to help us live this alien, foreign life. It's rather that this everyday life that we have of routine, of monotony, with its joys and its sorrows, that this life is rather something itself given to us by God in Jesus Christ. And that this giving of this ordinary life to us is what we renew and celebrate in the Mass. Too subtle, right? No, you've got to find a better way of saying that. Maybe the negative way it makes, always a temptation to escape from real life. It is too harsh, too heavy, too difficult, too scary, fears and everything. Always that's our danger. And we do that. That's probably why people watch soap operas. I don't have anything against it. Maybe that's why I'll watch the NBA game tonight. I'm not sure. Maybe that's what sports do for some of us. I'm not sure of that, but maybe. So I'm not against escape. But escape, when it becomes woven into our lives as the main thing about life, and when it becomes compulsive, and when it begins to take us over in some way, then we're messed up. What Ron called sin, escape from reality. So Eucharist, in his mind, is supposed to be our way of taking the everyday and offering up to God. Now, that's what I like to say at Mass. What do we bring those gifts forward? They represent us. They represent you and me as we struggle to make some sense out of our lives, to live somewhat decently, to do our jobs well, to try to be loving people to others, to bear the crosses we've got, our own unique ones. That's what we bring to the Mass, and that's what we offer. That's the routine and the ordinary. And what we say in the Eucharist is that sanctifies all of that. Bonner tries to offer some advice for making this connection clearer. He says that one of the key things, of course, is as we walk throughout our day, is to be more recollected. You can't expect to go to Mass and suddenly be a great prayer if one hasn't prayed throughout the day. And people do expect that, and it just won't work. You got to practice it. So one of his greatest things is get recollected periodically throughout the day, do your meditation, and remember what it's about, get those few moments of prayer, even a few seconds, and then one will pray better when one gets to Mass. He says we must be steadfast. In the midst of anxiety, we must face up to the harshness and routine of our everyday lives, not escape through external dissipation. So oddly enough, maybe he would say that by watching one less soap opera, one might pray better at Mass. If you want to somehow put it together. That is, if one's watching too many soap operas. If you're watching the right number of soap operas, then that's not going to help at all. Only if it's in excess. So that if this business of steadfastness. Then he says we must not indulge in self-pity, because that will keep us from really celebrating at Mass. Self-pity is, one of the big problems of life. Sit around and feel sorry for ourselves. Well, that happens periodically. We have to know what to do with it when we get into that kind of mood. Accepting disappointments without being shattered, he says, is important. Seeing them as healing elements for our brokenness. Okay, so all that is a way of saying that we take our everyday life and a whole lot of how we live it, our prayerfulness, our recollectedness, our steadfast spirit, all of that is what enables us to pray better. Then, of course, it works the other way then. Always what we have at Mass, and this is largely the function of the homily at Mass, is to say, what does this scripture reading, what does this theme now mean to us as we go forth from here? What do we take with us? Well, one of my students sometimes says to me after Mass, if he liked the homily, he says, enough to chew on there for a week. I like that when he says that to me. Maybe it's enough to chew on for a week. A week's worth. That's his summary statement. God, a week's worth. I'll be happy for 3 days. Or 4 hours, maybe. He's got a week's worth. That's terrific. We really had a good day here. So what we're trying to do is relate it the other way as well. Whatever goes on at the Mass is supposed to help us to carry it back. So the scripture reading's got a message for now. When I go around the country talking to priests and so on about preaching and talking to people about don't like homilies, two of the words I often hear is the homily is back there and up there. The two words that I hear the most. Back there means, I guess, it's taken back into a biblical world. It doesn't have anything to do with me. And up there means it doesn't have anything to do with my daily life or my routine. So what we've got to do is get the scripture reading, whole mood of the Mass, to filter into what we were really all about ourselves. Okay, I think maybe that's enough by this attempt to relate liturgy and life. In many ways, that's the crucial part of it. Even if you take the criticism that I offered of Ronner before and said that the sacraments build up a world for us, create a mentality, an outlook, still it's created only so that we can do a better job in our everyday life, so we can spread the kingdom in the world. Because you can't make an end of the sacraments in themselves. The church is not an end in itself. Church is sign and instrument of the kingdom. Kingdom is what counts, not sacraments. In heaven, there's no more sacraments. Maybe that's the way to put it. Sacraments are out in heaven. There you don't need sacraments. There you'll live the life. Well, there the union and the communion is direct and immediate. Sacraments are our way as we walk this earth with this bodily existence of ours of being reminded who God is and help to live it. I'm going to make one more point so that we can leave earlier here, I think. Well, I really have two more. I'll do these. I can do these all in 2 minutes or 2 hours. It doesn't make any difference. The next point in this whole development, I'm on Roman numeral 4. I don't know where the rest of you are, but this is talks about rhythm and the liturgy. And I think I've alluded to the problem already, and that is the problem is getting the right frequency for liturgical celebration. The problem was that in the past, people said, we know how frequent you ought to do it. Some of you people ought to go to Mass every day, go to confession once a week, or maybe once a month, and that's it. In other words, there were standards set that everybody sort of thought they ought to keep. And when they kept them, the result was very often routine. That is, okay, they went to confession once a week, but they couldn't figure out what they were going to say from one week to the next. You know, either make things up or repeat over and over. You know, I mean, it just was too much so that one got glutted, it became formal, it became a matter of routine. Now, what happened in all of that is that people never learned their own rhythm. That was the root problem there, that people did not learn how often they really needed sacraments or wanted them or benefited from them. They simply took an arbitrary number and figured, well, something's wrong with me. Must be my fault because I can't get into weekly confession. Must be my fault because I can't get up for daily Mass. A lot of people really serious about the religious life got all kind of guilt feelings because they thought, I don't measure up. There's something wrong with me. Well, there were priests who couldn't say out loud that they didn't want to celebrate Mass every day. Well, that's how they felt in their gut. That's their own rhythms were that way, but they didn't want to say it because it felt irreverent or something, or people wouldn't understand, or they thought it was diminishing this great gift of the Eucharist. So the great problem, as I see it, with this standard that was set was that people never found out their own rhythms, how often they ought to go to confession, for example. Finally, in delineating the problem, there's some people who simply have not gotten enough taste of liturgy. They simply don't like it. They think they don't like it, but they never given it a chance. They really not got in there and tried to learn what it was about, to participate, to get into it, and therefore they lose the power. These are the people who go to Mass on Easter and Christmas and wonder why it isn't some terrific experience. They just haven't practiced. They haven't gotten into it. They haven't learned its power, and so they go there and it's routine, and they think, well, I'll force myself to go next Easter. Yeah. Well, they just don't get much out of it. Okay, in response to this, we really do, first major point I think, we need to find our own rhythms for our frequency of our prayer life. And the way we find our rhythms, I think, is to find an amount of frequency that helps us to grow. So you can look at the sacrament of penance, and someone goes every week and it just gets routine. They say, well, wait, I'll go a month. Still, I'm not into it yet. Maybe they wait 6 months. They might wait a year. They might wait 5 years. And people are doing that today. But I would say that that is generally a healthy movement if people are using it to determine what helps them grow. Now, if they wait a whole year, they find out at the end of the year when they look at it, they did nothing but go downhill, steady decline, increasing. I'm worse now, I'm more bitchy, I don't pray less, I'm less concerned about my neighbor, more insensitive. And, as they see, after a year, what I should have done is get to confession at about the 4-month mark and reverse this trend downward. In other words, what we're trying to do in this is learn our rhythms. What do we need in order to make us function better? So I generally take a positive view of what's going on with the sacrament of penance today. Many people say, fewer people going to confession. It's terrible. We're losing it all. I don't really think that. I think that what many good people are doing is trying to figure out how to use the sacrament creatively, how to do it in a way that really means something to them, makes them more receptive, and helps them to grow. I think the same thing really goes for the celebration of the Eucharist. My own opinion is that we got our rhythms with that as well. And for some people, every day it's terrific, and they get a lot out of it, and they need it and want it. Some people, once a week is great, and I'm convinced there's some people who once a week is just too much. It's just glutted, and they don't benefit from it, and they'd be better off with as far as spacing out their liturgical celebration. I mean, it's obvious. We all have our rhythms about everything. And some people like to go to 3 ball games a year, and some people want to be there for 162. I mean, it's just different capacities and interests and so on. So I think it's really part of the growth of liturgical piety is to find our own rhythms and to experiment with it meaningfully. Offer to God my experiment to not go to confession for a year. Instead of feeling guilty, I ought to get there. Offer up to God the effort to figure this out for my life as to what really does well with all of this. Let me try one more heading here. I don't know what to say. Anybody want to ask me about frequency questions? One simple point is all I really have to say, and that is let's figure our own rhythms out, but let's do it in terms of what will help us grow. The premise of that, of course, is the liturgy can do that. Liturgy is powerful. It's good. It can help us. There's a strength there, and we've got to learn to tap it, because it doesn't work automatically. Let's make the sacraments work for us. Make them work for us. That's why I like the fact that people are using more creative means of going to confession. Many people start to say, well, I don't know how to do this now. And I sort of think that's good. So you don't know how to do it, so good. Now you got a fresh start to figure out what will be good for you. Don't do it a way to please me. Figure out a way that's going to help you understand yourself better, get at your motivation, make a positive plan for improvement. That's the kind of thing I think we're looking for. I suppose I could make one counterpoint to this. And I think it is that idea of, I got to say a lot of masses. Therefore, one of the things I got to try to do is to make the best of that. I got to try to find my own trigger points to get more into it. I got to find my way of psyching myself. And I got to think in terms of contributing to the community. I got to remind myself there's somebody here who's looking for something. Somebody's here maybe is really listening and needs something out of this homily. Some people here are feeling alienated. We got to make them feel welcome so they can get through the next week. So I guess I'm just thinking out loud really in the sense of what do I do to motivate myself. I think I'm trying to put something into it. So maybe parents are saying, I'm going to go every week even though my rhythm isn't that way, as a good example to my family. Or because my spouse wants to go and we got a nice togetherness and we go out for brunch afterwards, and it's a nice gathering point. In other words, I could think of a lot of ways of trying to motivate ourselves to get into it, even though maybe we're sensing our own rhythms are a little different. The last element in all of this, and I think maybe I should have taken this up first, I always think of these things later. But this is the relationship of the liturgy and symbolic action. Go back to the first thing I was saying. Why is it that some people don't appreciate liturgy? And I think the real root reason is because they don't appreciate symbols, myths. They become very literal-minded. Everything's straightforward, one-to-one. They're the same people who don't like poetry or don't like metaphors or want honest, straightforward, one-to-one conversation. They don't appreciate body language or subtle kinds of messages that are conveyed. They don't like that. They don't live in that world. And I think an important point again is to say not that these people are bad, it's just they're not prime candidates for praying like this at Mass. They're not into that. But I would say that if we're going to help people generally to appreciate liturgy more, help our young people to do it, then we're going to have them appreciate story and myth and ritual and symbol in life as a whole. The one thing we do in religious education is we tell people a lot of stories, help young kids to get a sense of ritual. We learn poetry. A lot of times they tell, and it's self-examination for me as well, I tell the priests that one of the best things we could do to prepare to become better preachers is to read more poetry, so that we would get a better feel for image and metaphor and symbol, which is really the language of liturgy. You notice that? Usually if you go out of church remembering something, it's not some long sentence that the homilist said, that's got this abstract reasoning in it. It's probably some image or metaphor or simple kind of notion that one carries around with oneself. Usually the striking symbol that gathers the ideas. And of course, Jesus was great at that. He gave us vine and the branches. So we're trying to figure out vine and branches, energy, how does that all fit together? So the good homilist would be able to figure out how to say that in a way that's striking, imaginative, poetic, so we would carry it with us. So liturgy, what we got to learn in general, I guess, is that there's another mode of communicating than just logical discourse. There's another way of interacting. Maybe the hug says more than all the words at the funeral home. Maybe just a simple touch says more about forgiveness than some long explanation of why you bugged me and why I'm now going to forgive you. Just the touch, the reaching out, might say it so much better. That's the language of symbol and ritual that I think we would have to get developed if we're going to appreciate it. So if someone's sitting here saying, geez, I can't get into Mass, I can't really appreciate it, maybe what has to be done is to read some poetry or to be more attentive to body language throughout, try to hear behind the words of one's spouse, pick up the feeling tone and not just the literal words. That's a stupid statement. Instead one picks up knowing glance, full answer. Instead is to try to hear behind the words, and there's a hurt there. It's not a question of a stupid statement. It's a question of be nice to me for a while, and sensitive to me, something. And I think that throughout this, in talking about liturgy, those of us who really love it and are concerned with it, we have to respect those with low RQ.